It was your second.
It's a critical time again.
Eric had cameramen following him around, trying to get some kind of stuff.
In April 2025, Eric Cantona spoke out against Manchester United's leadership. He accused owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the club's board of damaging everything the institution stood for. He pointed to hundreds of redundancies, the removal of Sir Alex Ferguson's ambassadorial role, and plans for a new stadium that he feared would strip away the club's soul. He said plainly that, under this ownership, he would not choose to support the club he once carried on his shoulders. It was a small moment in a long career, but it captured something that has never changed about him. Eric Cantona has never been afraid to say exactly what he thinks, no matter who is listening or what it might cost him. That same fearlessness is what made him unforgettable on the pitch. When Cantona arrived in English football, the game was going through one of its biggest transformations. The Premier League had only just been created. A wave of foreign players was beginning to arrive in a league that had spent decades built on pace, power, and directness. Nobody symbolized the collision between those two footballing worlds more than Cantona. He treated the game as an art form. He believed in space, touch, vision, and timing. He had little patience for football played as a purely physical contest, and he sometimes compared players who relied only on strength and aggression to laborers rather than artists. That belief made him one of the most watchable players of his generation. It also meant that, again and again, he found himself in direct confrontation with a version of English football built on entirely different values. Over the course of his career in England, 7 men became central to that story. Some tried to stop him with force, some tried to get inside his head. One wore the same shirt as him every week. Together, their stories trace the tension between Cantona's brilliance and the rougher edges of the English game in the 1990s, and they help explain how that game slowly began to change. Before Manchester United ever came calling, Cantona's English adventure began at Leeds United under manager Howard Wilkinson. He arrived with a reputation for talent and trouble in equal measure, and at Leeds, for a while, the talent won out. He played a key role in the club's first division title win in 1992, at a time when the top flight was still a season away from becoming the Premier League. But his time at Leeds did not last, and the reasons were both tactical and personal. Wilkinson's Leeds side was built on a very traditional English approach. Long balls were played up to the target man, Lee Chapman, whose job was to hold the ball up and win it in the air. Cantona wanted something completely different. He wanted the ball played to his feet, space to turn, and the freedom to dictate the tempo of a match through short, clever passing. As results dipped, Wilkinson leaned further into the system built around Chapman's physical presence, and Cantona found himself used more and more as an impact substitute rather than a first-choice starter. It created real strain both in terms of tactics and inside the dressing room itself. The tension was made worse by something that had nothing to do with football at all. After Cantona eventually left the club, a rumor began to spread that he had been having an affair with Lee Chapman's wife, the TV actress Leslie Ash. It was completely false. Both Chapman and Ash denied it firmly and repeatedly, and Ash later said publicly that the rumor had caused real damage to her personal life. None of that stopped it from spreading. Supporters picked it up and ran with it, and Manchester United fans even turned it into a chant. It says something about the size of Cantona's public profile, even that early in his English career, that a baseless rumor about his private life could travel so far and take on such a life of its own. The move that changed everything happened almost by accident. Manchester United chairman Martin Edwards placed a call to Leeds about an entirely different transfer, inquiring about defender Dennis Irwin. During that conversation, Leeds chairman Bill Fotherby mentioned, almost in passing, that Wilkinson wanted Cantona out of the club because of personal differences between the two men. Sir Alex Ferguson did not need to be told twice. Manchester United secured Cantona for just £1 £2 million, a fee that would soon look absurdly small given what followed. Leeds' loss, born out of a clash between one player's artistic instincts and one manager's rigid system, became the foundation of Manchester United's dominance for the rest of the decade. By the time he crossed the Pennines to Manchester, Cantona had already learned an important lesson about English football. Talent alone was not enough to guarantee acceptance. He would need to win over teammates, supporters, and opponents alike, often on their terms rather than his own. At Old Trafford, he found a manager willing to build the team around his gifts, rather than force him to fit into someone else's system. And the results were immediate. Manchester United's fortunes transformed almost overnight. and Cantona quickly became the most influential player in English football. But success on the pitch did not mean the underlying tensions disappeared. If anything, his growing stature only sharpened the contrasts between his approach to the game and the instincts of many of the players around him. Not every battle Cantona fought in English football was against an opponent. Some of the most interesting tension existed inside his own dressing room, in the shape of his Manchester United teammate Paul Ince. Ince liked to call himself the Governor. He was a combative, box-to-box midfielder who built his game on work rate, physical intensity, and direct confrontation. He respected what Cantona could do with a football more than almost anyone. But he was not always comfortable with the special status Cantona seemed to enjoy. Sir Alex Ferguson gave Cantona a level of creative freedom that other players simply were not afforded, and that inevitably created friction among a squad used to a flatter, more uniform structure. It wasn't only about tactics or favoritism. Cantona's very presence changed the culture of the dressing room. His intense personal training habits and his distant, almost regal manner set a new bar for professionalism that the rest of the squad had to adjust to, whether they liked it or not. Despite the underlying friction, when trouble came, Ince stood beside his teammate rather than against him. During the chaos that followed Cantona's most notorious moment at Selhurst Park, Ince was seen throwing a punch of his own at a supporter who had been abusing Cantona as he was escorted from the pitch. Whatever tension existed between the two men off the pitch, in the heat of that moment, Ince backed him without hesitation. If Ince represented an internal clash of styles, Wimbledon's Vinnie Jones represented something far more direct. Jones, despite being Welsh rather than English, became the symbolic face of Wimbledon's so-called Crazy Gang, a team built almost entirely around physical intimidation and a refusal to let more gifted opponents settle into a rhythm. During an FA Cup tie in the 1993-94 season, Wimbledon hosted Manchester United, and Jones wasted no time making his intentions clear. He caught Cantona with a dangerous knee-high challenge, delivered well away from the ball. Under the far more relaxed refereeing standards of the era, Jones escaped with nothing more than a yellow card, even though most people watching today would expect a tackle like that to end in an immediate red. What made the moment memorable was not the tackle itself, but Cantona's reaction to it. He did not go down clutching his leg, and he did not appeal furiously to the referee. He simply got back to his feet, straightened his shirt, and carried on playing as though nothing had happened at all. For a Wimbledon side that had built its entire identity around rattling more technical opponents through sheer physical force, it was a small but meaningful defeat. Their most reliable weapon had been used, and it had achieved absolutely nothing. Chelsea's Dennis Wise chose a different route entirely. Rather than trying to physically intimidate Cantona, Wise went after him with pure psychology. Wise had built something of a reputation for needling opposing penalty takers before big moments, and he had used the tactic successfully before, once betting Everton's Tony Cottee a £5 note that he would miss from the spot. Cottee did miss. During the 1994 FA Cup final, with Manchester United leading 1-0 and Cantona stepping up to take a penalty, Wise tried the same trick. He told Cantona he would bet him a fiver that he'd miss. Cantona's response became one of the enduring stories of that final. Without missing a beat, he calmly raised the stakes. Okay, £100 he reportedly told Wise. He then sent goalkeeper Dimitri Kerin the wrong way to double Manchester United's lead. Later in the same match, when United were awarded a second penalty, Cantona walked straight over to Wise and offered him double or quits on the same bet. Wise wisely declined. Cantona scored again in exactly the same fashion, and Manchester United went on to win the final 4-0. It remains one of the clearest examples of Cantona meeting an attempt at psychological pressure with total composure, and turning it back on the man who tried it. Not every attempt to unsettle him ended the same way. Liverpool's Neil Ruddock, known to almost everyone as Razor, openly admitted that he did not have the footballing ability to contain Cantona through conventional means. So instead, he tried something else entirely. During Cantona's high-profile comeback match at Old Trafford on the 1st of October 1995, Ruddock zeroed in on something deeply personal to Cantona: his famously upturned shirt collar, a small but unmistakable symbol of his defiance and status on the pitch. Throughout the match, whenever play stopped, Ruddock would run over and flatten the collar back down. Again and again, a small and almost childish gesture that turned out to be remarkably effective. It worked in the sense that it clearly got under Cantona's skin. He responded by kicking, elbowing, and stamping on Ruddock's feet through large parts of the match, and at one point called him a fat bastard. Ruddock, for his part, mocked Cantona's French accent and gestured mockingly at his own stomach in return. By the time the final whistle blew, Cantona was demanding a fight in the tunnel, repeatedly shouting Lee Tunnel at Ruddock as the players left the pitch. He stormed straight toward the Stretford End tunnel afterwards and waited there. Ruddock later admitted that, faced with the sheer size and very real anger of the man waiting for him, he began to panic. It took Liverpool goalkeeper David James physically stepping in and walking Ruddock away to defuse the situation before it turned into something far worse. Sir Alex Ferguson would later point to that match as the clearest example of just how effective a well-aimed piece of psychological needling could be against Cantona, even when brute force had failed completely. The most consequential clash of Cantona's English career, though, involved two Crystal Palace defenders working in tandem, Richard Shaw and Gareth Southgate. It happened on the 25th of January, 1995 at Selhurst Park, with Manchester United in the middle of a title race against Blackburn Rovers. Crystal Palace built their entire defensive plan around stopping Cantona physically. Richard Shaw was given the job of marking him closely throughout the match, and he did so relentlessly through shirt-pulling late challenges and a steady stream of niggling fouls that referee Alan Wilkie largely allowed to go unpunished. Gareth Southgate organized the defense around that approach, and he later admitted to Ferguson that Palace had taken real pride in how physically they had gone after Cantona that day, viewing it as their best available method for shutting down his creativity. By the 49th minute, after yet another foul from Shaw went unpunished by the referee, Cantona's frustration finally broke through. He lashed out with a kick at Shaw's legs and was immediately shown a straight red card. As he made his way off the pitch under the escort of Manchester United's kitman, a Crystal Palace supporter named Matthew Simmons ran down 11 rows of seating to confront him directly, subjecting him to intense verbal abuse that included xenophobic language. What happened in the next few seconds became one of the most replayed and most discussed moments in the entire history of English football. Cantona launched himself feet first into the crowd with a kung fu-style kick, followed by a series of punches. Paul Ince was drawn into the chaos that followed as United's players tried to get themselves and their teammate away from the stands. The consequences were severe and far-reaching. The Football Association handed Cantona a 9-month suspension from all football. A separate criminal case followed, initially resulting in a 2-week prison sentence that was reduced on appeal to 120 hours of community service instead. The whole affair divided public opinion for months, with some seeing Cantona as a man who had finally been pushed too far, and others seeing an athlete who had crossed a line that could not be excused. His teammate Steve Bruce later revealed that Cantona hated his community service duties, which involved working behind a shop till so intensely that he joked he would rather have served the prison sentence instead. Taken individually, these 7 relationships tell 7 very different stories. Chapman represents a tactical and cultural mismatch that ultimately worked out in Cantona's favor by sending him to Manchester United. Ince shows the quieter tension that can exist even between teammates who respect one another. Jones and Wise both represent attempts to break Cantona, one through violence and one through mind games, and both attempts failed against his remarkable composure. Ruddock shows the opposite. Proof that Cantona's fierce pride, the very thing that made him so magnetic, could also be turned into a weakness by an opponent clever enough to find it. Shaw and Southgate together represent the most serious consequence of all. A carefully planned physical strategy that eventually pushed Cantona past the point of self-control, with consequences that followed him for the rest of his career. None of these stories are really about hatred, whatever the headlines might promise. They are about 2 different footballing cultures grinding against one another during a period of enormous change in the English game. One culture was built on directness, physical force, and a distrust of anything too elegant or too clever. The other, carried almost single-handedly into England by players like Cantona, was built on space, technique, and control. Some of these confrontations Cantona won outright, through nothing more than his own calm. Others exposed real flaws, moments where his fierce pride tipped over into something that damaged him and his club. But zoom out far enough, and a bigger picture appears. Cantona's presence in English football and the reactions it constantly provoked helped push the entire domestic game toward change. Rules around dangerous and reckless tackling were tightened in the years that followed. Referees began to take the protection of skillful, technical players far more seriously than they had in the early 90s. The old assumption that a purely artistic, continental style of football could not survive the physical demands of the English game was proven wrong. match by match, confrontation by confrontation. Cantona was never a calm or easy figure to manage, on the pitch or off it. He was proud, quick to anger, and at times his own biggest obstacle. But he was also one of the players most responsible for proving that flair, touch, and imagination could not just survive in England but could actually dominate there. The modern Premier League, filled with technically gifted players from every corner of the world, owes something real to the battles Cantona fought, and sometimes lost control of, in order to prove that point. His collar stayed up for a reason. He never stopped believing that football could be art, even in a league that spent years trying to convince him otherwise. And by the time he retired, he had gone a long way toward proving himself right. Decades later, whether he is criticizing club owners or reflecting on old rivalries, the same conviction still comes through. Cantona has never really changed his mind about what football should be.